Most of us go through life believing we understand strength. We think it's about keeping our composure, maintaining that perfect exterior, never letting anyone see us crack. But what if I told you that everything you've been taught about emotional resilience is backwards? What if the very thing you think is protecting you is actually the source of your deepest weakness? Here's something that will shift your entire perspective. The emotions you refuse to acknowledge don't simply vanish into thin air. They become invisible architects of your reality, silently constructing barriers that limit your potential, drain your energy, and sabotage your relationships in ways you never even realized. Think about this for a moment. When was the last time you felt genuinely exhausted for no apparent reason? When did you last find yourself irritated by things that shouldn't matter? Have you ever wondered why certain situations trigger disproportionate responses in you? The answer might be hiding in the emotional basement of your psyche, where you've been storing feelings you never gave yourself permission to experience. From our earliest days, we're conditioned to categorize emotions into acceptable and unacceptable categories. Joy, excitement, and gratitude get the green light, while anger, sadness, and fear are treated like unwelcome guests at a dinner party. We learn to smile through our pain, to say "I'm fine" when we're anything but, to project strength even when we're crumbling inside. But here's where the plot thickens. In our desperate attempt to appear invulnerable, we've created a psychological pressure cooker. Every suppressed feeling adds to the internal pressure, and like any closed system, eventually something has to give. Modern neuroscience reveals something absolutely fascinating about this process. When we actively suppress emotions, our brain's prefrontal cortex, the CEO of our mental operations, works overtime to maintain control. Meanwhile, the amygdala, our brain's alarm system, remains hypervigilant, constantly scanning for threats. It's like having your foot on the brake and the accelerator simultaneously. You're not moving forward, but you're burning tremendous amounts of mental fuel. This is why emotional suppression feels manageable in the short term, but devastating in the long run. You're essentially running multiple background programs on your mental operating system, each one consuming processing power and memory. No wonder you feel drained by the end of the day, even when nothing particularly challenging happened. But the damage goes far deeper than simple fatigue. Repressed emotions don't stay contained in neat little boxes. They leak into every aspect of your existence, coloring your perceptions, influencing your decisions, and shaping your relationships in profound ways. Consider someone who has spent years suppressing anger. They might find themselves unable to establish healthy boundaries, constantly saying yes when they desperately want to say no. Their unexpressed fury transforms into passive aggression, resentment, or a chronic sense of being taken advantage of. They wonder why they attract people who walk all over them, never realizing that their inability to express anger directly has trained others to disregard their needs. Or think about someone who has banished sadness from their emotional vocabulary. They might struggle with genuine intimacy because authentic connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability means allowing others to see your full emotional range. They present a cheerful facade to the world while feeling increasingly isolated and misunderstood. The person who refuses to acknowledge fear might become paralyzed by perfectionism, attempting to control every variable in their environment to prevent the feared emotions from surfacing. They exhaust themselves trying to create a risk-free existence, missing opportunities for growth and adventure. Here's the truly insidious part. This process happens so gradually that we don't even notice it's occurring. We adapt to carrying this emotional weight, mistaking our numbness for strength and our exhaustion for maturity. We congratulate ourselves on our composure, while our authentic selves slowly suffocate beneath layers of artificial control. Research in emotional psychology has uncovered something remarkable about this phenomenon. Studies published in leading journals show that people who habitually suppress emotions actually demonstrate lower resilience when faced with stress. The very behavior we adopt to appear strong systematically weakens our capacity to handle life's inevitable challenges. Think about the irony of this situation. We repress emotions to project strength, but this repression literally rewires our brains for weakness. We become less adaptable, less resilient, and less capable of bouncing back from adversity. It's like training for a marathon by sitting on the couch. The preparation completely contradicts the goal. But why do we persist in this self-defeating pattern? The answer lies in what psychologists call emotional conditioning. From childhood, we receive countless messages about which feelings are acceptable and which are dangerous. A child who expresses sadness might be told to toughen up or be strong. A young person showing anger might face punishment or withdrawal of love. Over time, our brains create unconscious rules about emotional expression, and these rules become so automatic that we don't even realize we're following them. This conditioning creates what I call the strength illusion, the belief that controlling our emotions equals controlling our lives. But here's the paradox. When we refuse to feel our emotions, they end up controlling us from the shadows. That suppressed anger influences our decision-making. That buried sadness affects our capacity for joy. That hidden fear limits our willingness to take necessary risks. Now let me share something that might completely transform your understanding of emotional strength. There's a concept in psychology called emotional integration, and it represents the complete opposite of suppression. Integration doesn't mean becoming an emotional hurricane, expressing every feeling without filter. Instead, it means developing the capacity to acknowledge, understand, and learn from your emotions without being overwhelmed by them. When you integrate rather than suppress, something remarkable happens. Your emotions transform from enemies into allies, from sources of weakness into wellsprings of wisdom. That anger you've been hiding might reveal important information about your violated boundaries. The sadness you've been avoiding might point toward what truly matters to your heart. The fear you've been suppressing might illuminate areas where growth is calling you. Brain imaging studies have shown that simply naming what you're feeling, saying I'm angry, or I'm sad, or I'm afraid, actually reduces activity in the brain's emotional centers, while increasing activity in areas associated with regulation and control. It's as if acknowledgement itself creates the very strength that suppression promises, but never delivers. But the benefits of emotional integration extend far beyond personal well-being. When you stop hiding from your feelings, you stop hiding from other people. Vulnerability, rather than being a weakness, becomes the foundation of genuine connection. When you allow others to see your authentic self, not the polished perfect version, but the real, complex, sometimes struggling human being, you invite them to do the same. This is how real relationships form, not through mutual performance of strength, but through shared honesty about the full spectrum of human experience. In a world obsessed with highlighting reals and filtered perfection, the person who dares to be authentically human creates space for others to do the same. Consider this. Every meaningful relationship in your life probably involves someone who has seen you at less than your best and chosen to stay anyway. These connections weren't built on your ability to repress emotions, but on your willingness to be seen in your complexity. Your struggles, your fears, your moments of vulnerability. These aren't bugs in the system. They're features that make genuine intimacy possible. So how do we break free from the prison of emotional suppression? How do we reclaim the strength that comes from integration rather than repression? It begins not with dramatic confession or overwhelming release, but with gentle awareness. Start by asking yourself a simple question. What am I really feeling right now? Not what you think you should feel, not what would be convenient to feel, but what's actually present in your emotional landscape. And here's the crucial part. Don't judge what you discover. Emotions are not moral statements about your character. Anger doesn't make you a bad person. Sadness doesn't make you weak. Fear doesn't make you pathetic. These feelings make you human, and humanity is not a flaw to be corrected, but a reality to be embraced. From this foundation of self-acceptance, you can begin to practice emotional integration in small, manageable ways. Write in a journal without censoring your thoughts. Talk to a trusted friend or counselor about what you're actually experiencing. When you feel tension in your body, pause and ask what emotion might be present and what it needs from you. These practices might seem simple, but neuroscience shows they literally rewire your brain. Each time you acknowledge rather than suppress, each time you integrate rather than reject, you strengthen neural pathways that support resilience and weaken those that perpetuate suffering. You begin to understand that emotions, like weather, are temporary phenomena. They arise, they peak, they subside. None of them last forever, and the more you practice feeling them without being consumed by them, the less frightening they become. You develop what therapists call distress tolerance, the ability to experience difficult emotions without immediately trying to escape or suppress them. But here's something even more profound. When you stop cutting yourself off from difficult emotions, you also stop cutting yourself off from positive ones. Suppression isn't selective. When you numb the pain, you also numb the joy. When you block out fear, you also block out excitement. When you silence anger, you mute passion as well. This is why people who have spent years suppressing emotions often report feeling disconnected, not just from their pain, but from their aliveness itself. They've traded the full spectrum of human experience for the gray safety of emotional numbness. They're protected from hurt, but they're also isolated from wonder, from love, from the electric feeling of being fully alive. The question then becomes, do you want safety or do you want aliveness? Because safety without vitality is merely survival, and survival is not the same as living. Every great story, every deep connection, every moment of profound growth comes not from emotional suppression, but from people willing to feel fully, to be vulnerable, to risk being seen in their imperfect humanity. If you've been carrying emotions you've never allowed yourself to fully experience, perhaps now is the time to consider a different approach. Not to drown in these feelings, not to be overwhelmed by them, but to sit with them with compassion and curiosity, to say, I see you, I acknowledge you, I'm willing to learn from you. In doing so, you might discover a form of strength you never knew existed. Not the brittle strength of emotional armor, but the flexible strength of emotional wisdom. Not the exhausting strength of constant control, but the sustainable strength of authentic presence. Years of research in positive psychology confirm what ancient wisdom traditions have always known. Resilience comes not from avoiding difficulty, but from developing the capacity to move through it with grace. The strongest people are not those who never feel pain, but those who feel it fully and continue to love anyway. They're not the ones who never experience fear, but those who acknowledge their fear and act courageously despite it. So the next time you find yourself tempted to push down an uncomfortable emotion, remember this. What you suppress today becomes the invisible weight you carry tomorrow. But what you acknowledge and integrate today becomes the wisdom and strength you live with forever. The psychology of emotional suppression teaches us that true weakness lies not in feeling too much, but in feeling too little. Not in being too vulnerable, but in being too defended. Not in caring too deeply, but in numbing ourselves to the point where we can't care at all. Life will always present us with challenges. Pain, disappointment, and fear are inevitable parts of the human experience. But freedom belongs to those who dare to feel these experiences fully while remaining open to the possibility of joy, connection, and growth. In the end, the choice is simple. We can either be prisoners of our own emotional suppression, or warriors strengthened by our willingness to feel. The strongest among us are not those who never cry, but those who cry when they need to and continue moving forward. They're not the ones who never feel anger, but those who use their anger as information about their boundaries and values. They're not the people who never experience fear, but those who feel the fear and take action anyway. This is the paradox at the heart of emotional strength. By accepting our vulnerability, we become unbreakable. By acknowledging our emotions, we gain mastery over them. By feeling deeply, we develop the capacity to live fully. And perhaps most importantly, by being authentically human, we give others permission to do the same.